Hello and welcome back. If you're new here, hello, nice to meet you. And if you've seen our videos before, hello, thanks for coming again. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys sort of a continuation of a video that I did before. A little while ago, just before we went away on holiday, I made a video about some tips or tricks that you can do the week before you go away on a long holiday or a camp trip, as it was for us. And just some things to help you pack efficiently. And one of the tips that I shared there was making an extra meal the week before you go away, or making extra meals so that you can take some food with you on your holiday that is healthy, already cooked, that you don't need to worry about, and is going to be wholesome food that you don't need to buy along the way on your trip. Well, I kind of used that and made something else with our extra meals. And I made sure to pick some meals that I would be able to turn into sandwich meat or kind of extra meal meat, because the idea was that I would have extra meat on hand to use for our sandwiches. And so I made an extra roast, extra steak, as well as another chicken that I would be able to pull apart and have extra meals for our trip. Now, depending on how long you're going away for, you could just do one meal or make the meal early in advance and freeze it so that you can take it with, whatever works for your situation. But I thought this would be helpful to share because it's kind of also a cold cut replacement in our family. We stopped buying cold cuts a little while ago because it's so easy to buy a pack of cold cuts and make sandwiches. But I thought, I feel like we can take our quality meat and we can turn those into sandwich meat. And I'll show you just how I did it. So let's get started with the roast. First, I salt and peppered each side of the roast. Peeled some garlic and sliced it into strips or quarters. And then very carefully I poked some holes into our roast and slipped in garlic pieces all around the roast. Loosely dice the vegetables you have on hand. I had some carrots, a turnip, a rutabaga, and some mushrooms. Now, what you need to think about is that these vegetables will be cooking in a slow cooker for quite a long time, which is kind of the equivalent of cooking it in the oven for a really long time, but just quicker. So if those vegetables were to cook for a long time, how big should you cut them to not be mushy or to at least get cooked all the way through? So for my carrots, I'm kind of chopping them to a medium-ish size because they're kind of a harder vegetable and they'll take a little longer to soften. I usually take into consideration that harder vegetables will take a little longer to cook, and soft vegetables like mushroom doesn't need much cooking time to become really soft. So I'll just kind of cut my vegetables depending on that. And then also think about these vegetables are going to be in this Instant Pot for, only really an hour, but that is the equivalent of it baking in the oven for many hours at a time. So I just imagine what would happen to a carrot if it was in my oven for 6 hours, and then I cut it accordingly, kind of on the bigger side, because I know that, I don't want it to be totally mush, but I do want it to be softened after 6 hours. If you can follow that analogy. usually there will be a lot of water in your meat, which you can't see right now, but as it's cooking it'll cook out. So there will be liquid in your pot. But if you want some extra liquid, you could make a beef broth and add it in. Also, depending on the quality of meat that you're using, usually there's these little fat layers inside of a roast which do end up cooking and seeping out and adding to the flavor. So the salt and pepper, the garlic you've got in there, and that kind of fatty goodness that will cook out will be just enough flavor. Of course, we had some of the roast for dinner because the whole idea was to have enough for dinner and then have an extra dinner to set aside. Meal number 2 was the steaks. So when we made steak that week, I gave my husband some extra steak to make, and those extra pieces I saved in the fridge until later in the week when you'll see I'm gonna chop it all up for sandwich meat. So he added some salt and pepper to the steaks, put them on the barbecue, flipped them once, and then took them off when they were ready. And we enjoyed some steak that night. And then meal number 3, the final meal that I made that week to take with on our camp trip, was an extra chicken. So I cooked one chicken for us to have that evening and then another one to be taking with on our camp trip. Chicken is so easy to make in the oven. I just add both chickens to a pan, chop an onion halfway through and put it at the base of the pan. And then any kind of vegetables that I have on hand, I'll dice or chop kind of loosely and add it to the pan as well. My pan with tin foil, or if you have a lid for your pan, even better, and I cooked it in the oven for an hour at 350 degrees Celsius, and then for the final, let's say 5 or 10 minutes, I'll turn my heat up much higher and just let that top layer skin kind of brown up, sizzle, roast to deliciousness. Now there's many other ways to make a chicken. Many people will butter the inside or use toothpicks to close in the legs and really hold the moisture. The way that I'm doing it here, I have found that there is lots of moisture in the chicken when I'm finished baking it or roasting it. And I think that could be because it depends on the quality of chicken that you're using. Of course, any chicken is fine, but if you can buy a quality chicken, I don't think you're gonna have that much issue with the juiciness of your chicken at the end, unless you overcook it. So start with an hour at 350 degrees Celsius and you should be just fine. So right before we left for our camp trip at the end of the week, I took out the meat that I had saved in the fridge and started putting it into my food processor and dicing it up for lunch meat. This is so easy to do if you have a food processor. Just kind of add slowly small pieces to your food processor and chop. It's really that easy. And then you end up with these nice mincy pieces of high quality meat. right replacer for cold cuts. I know it's quality meat, I know it's gonna taste good. Yeah, I just prefer to make our cold cuts like this these days. And now I had a bunch of cold cuts to take with us on the trip. This is a really easy way that you can make cold cuts or make extra food for a camp trip or a holiday that you're going on if you want to be eating healthy food, and healthy in the sense that, you know, just being out of the house, you don't have to go buy a lot of junk food on the way just because it's convenient, but you can have something with you if it's possible.
Without thinking twice, and I knew it would catch up and that we would be the ones left behind. The stories I've been told, they never seem to leave my mind. And this road that I am on, I gotta stay here for some time.
So I hope that this has been helpful to you, and if you're looking for an alternative to cold cuts, or you're going away and you want to take some extra meals, make some extra meals the week before you go. And if you're trying to make cold cut meat, chop it up in your food processor if you've got one. Very handy tip. We enjoy it. Alright, thanks for staying tuned if you've been here this long, and hang around, subscribe, like this video, and you can catch some of our future videos coming up shortly. Alright, bye.
On this road that I am on, I gotta stay here for some time.